Um, so why have we started looking at this tiered approach in mathematics? It all comes down to this North Star, this idea of are we going to allow identity and social location to continue to predict outcomes? And when the math department at Learning Support Services started considering this North Star and what it means for math, we started digging into really modified IEPs, and we came up with these beliefs and commitments. So, equity does not mean that every student should receive identical instruction. All children should have access to grade level mathematics content. And this is the key bullet right there, which is a bit of a change from what we're used to doing at WRDSB. For a long time, the solution has been when children are struggling in math, we're going to put them on a modified IEP, which keeps these students 2 to 3 years behind their peers. And we have a really great on ramp for IEPs. We don't have a great off ramp. It's actually called grade 9. So, what happens is we have students going into grade 9 who have to earn the credit in order to get their high school diploma. And the last math they've seen might be at a grade 5 or a grade 6 level. And that's super problematic. So, interventions must focus on content that is connected with and promotes the grade level curriculum through problem solving, reasoning, and discourse. This comes from the idea that interventions in the past have usually been after a child's already been put on a modified IEP. It usually, the responsibility kind of belongs to one person in the school. We want a more of a collective responsibility around interventions. We want interventions to happen first, and then if we're still not successful, then we consider a modified IEP. And generally, interventions in the past have really resulted on students being withdrawn and doing low level knowledge content calculations as opposed to deep, rich thinking opportunities. So those students weren't being exposed to critical thinking in math. We are currently working collaboratively with grades 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 math teachers and special education resource teachers in several of our schools. And we would like to develop a tiered intervention structure that promotes inclusivity and narrows opportunity gaps in math instruction. And we do believe that every student has the right to pursue whatever post-secondary pathway they aspire to. And currently, the modified IEP is impacting that significantly. So we do know math is one of the biggest barriers to students obtaining a secondary diploma. So it's foundational that they are successful in it. And because of this, this applies to all grades. So we've developed this vision for math by providing all students access to high level, equitable, and inclusive mathematics instructional practices. We will ensure that identity and social location no longer predict outcomes. So that's where the North Star comes back into it. School system and classroom leadership and learning is foundational to creating the conditions in which students will thrive in their mathematics education. And these goals span all grade levels from kindergarten to graduation. And in this way, our WRDSB Math Action Achievement Plan or Math Achievement Action Plan is for all WRDSB educators. So I'm going to give you the big picture on what this tiered approach looks like. And then I'm going to get into more details about each one and then give you the specifics about what this would look like in a classroom. So we dug in deep into this is a ministry document, high impact instructional practices in mathematics. And we pulled out these 4 practices to focus on this year. And the big one is small group instruction. And that's what you're going to be seeing when you go in to observe these classrooms and how we can use tools and representations to help students understand the math as opposed to it just being like computational, but also using tools and representations so all students have access to the math. Because if we're taking away modified IEPs, we need to make sure there's entry points for all students in the classroom. Let me be clear. We're not taking away modified IEPs. We're just not making that the first solution. We want to intervention first. And then if a child is not succeeding with intervention, then we need to have conversations around modified IEPs. Deliberate practice and math conversations. So our tiered approach focuses on 2 groups of students. Students who require more time on grade level material of essential key concepts. And I'm going to explain what we mean by essential key concepts in a moment. And then those students who are entering your grade with missed learning opportunities on essential key concepts from previous years that need to be addressed. So if this mason jar represents the time that you have with students around math instruction, and this jug represents the amount of curriculum that you are expected to address in the time that you have your students, It's not taking a rocket science for you to see that this mason jar is overflowing. There is not enough room in the time that we have the students with us to address all of the curriculum in depth and really well. And in addition to water, which is the essence of life, some of your students are going to require a vitamin C. They're going to require some orange juice. So somehow we have to fit this orange juice into the mason jar as well. These are those students who, even though you've taught your unit, they maybe haven't, they maybe didn't quite grasp it in the amount of time that you were teaching this unit, and they need some more exposure to that. And then we have some students are going to require a wheatgrass boost, because these are students who are coming into your class that already have some missed learning opportunities from previous grades. And we just can't fit all of that into this mason jar in the time that we have the students. Some students are going to require all three of these areas. Some will require two, and some will only require one. So what we have done and Learning Support Services is we've looked hard at the curriculum. We've talked to teachers from secondary all the way down to grade 3 and 4. We have, when we looked at the curriculum, we looked at which topics are being emphasized in which division, and then which topics don't get so much attention moving forward. So for example, in intermediate, we do a lot of work with integers and operations with fractions, and that doesn't really exist after they leave us so much. It's only a little hint in the grade 9 curriculum. So we need to make sure like that area of the curriculum is really paid attention to, because students need to be proficient at that in order to do what builds on it next. Similarly, in primary, whole numbers are a really important piece. And we need to make sure students are really, really great with their number sense and operational sense, because we don't pay a lot of attention in junior and intermediate to coming back and revisiting that concept, because we assume it's already in place. So we pulled out some key essential concepts, and this now looks like our glass of water. So now if these are the essential key concepts that I'm going to make sure all students in my class are proficient on, that's my first priority. These are the essential key concepts that we've come up with for each division. And I'm going to share this slide deck with you. So I'm not going to go through all of them right now. But for each division, we have 4 areas. And we are saying these are the areas that you pay the most attention to. And these are the areas that the tiered approach is focusing on. So when you hear me say essential key concepts, this is what I'm talking about for your division. And then of course, strand A umbrellas all of that around the social emotional learning, mathematical processes, and making connections. So let's go back to our analogy here. If these are the essential key concepts that I'm going to like make sure all students are capable of doing, I now have a little bit of room in my mason jar to address those students who we need to revisit these essential key concepts because they didn't get it the first time around. So that's the orange juice. That's called tier 2. And then I can make some time to also address that wheatgrass. This now can all fit in. Whatever time I have left after that, I look at the rest of the curriculum. And I'm going to talk about how we address the rest of the curriculum, because it's not like you're just putting the rest of the curriculum on the shelf right now. So this is our tiered approach visual. It is basically the learning for all triangle, but we have flipped it upside down. And we flipped it upside down on purpose because our goal right now is that all students have access to grade level essential key concepts. That's mandatory if we want students to be able to be successful in high school. So these are the essential key concepts. This is where your glass of water comes in. This is tier 1. It's whole class. You do it through universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. I'm going to go into more detail in a moment about that. Our tier 2 is that orange juice. So finding a way to come back during your purposeful practice days to revisit some of those concepts for students who didn't quite grasp it the first time around, but also to revisit those concepts for students who did grasp it the first time around. Because what we know is 6 to 8 weeks after you've taught it, it's left its short-term memory. So this will tell you, did all students actually get it? Or were students getting it just because they were in that unit at that time and that's what they were focusing on? Tier 3 then is our wheatgrass, and it actually happens outside of math class. And that's our small group withdrawal, which we're going to continue to talk about. So here's tier 1. The idea behind tier 1 when thinking about those essential key concepts is that all other areas of the curriculum are vehicles for teaching those essential key concepts. So what I mean by that is if I'm in the measurement unit and I'm thinking about teaching area or perimeter, I'm still teaching operational sense. I could involve fractions in that in intermediate or even in grade 6. And now I'm continuing to teach and revisit operations with fractions. I'm teaching multiplication. I'm teaching algebra because I might give them the area and ask them what the side lengths are going to be. So I'm doing all of these things and I'm remembering those foundational skills and I'm teaching these topics through those essential key concepts, continuing to revisit, continuing to make it explicit, continuing to assess where students' level of understanding is on it. Those tier 2 purposeful practice days, that should happen 1 60-minute period a week. This should be happening anyway in your class. If you're following the comprehensive math approach, you would have learning through problem solving days, and then you would have days where you just wanted students to consolidate their learning about what they have been working on, and those would be your purposeful practice days. So what we are proposing is that during those purposeful practice days, you actually incorporate small group instruction into that, and maybe you're already doing that. So in a 1 60-minute period a week, the class would engage in 3 12 to 14-minute stations. That's our sweet spot, somewhere in 12 to 14-minute stations. And one of those stations would be Coach's Corner, and then which is you doing some small group instruction on essential key concepts. And then the other activities that the students would be rotating through would involve fluency or purposeful practice activities, either for the topic you're teaching right now or for one of the essential key concepts. We have also created a developmental tracking sheet that you can share with your CERT, or if there is somebody else in the school that has some extra time that comes in to support math, not necessarily the CERT, those can be shared so that we have a collective responsibility around that. This is what it could look like if you are lucky enough to be at a school where you have another adult who comes into your room to support you during math class. I know that's a bit of a myth and a fable, but if it exists, I know it exists in some schools. This is what the rotation would look like. So you would have a coach's corner here with one of the adults, a coach's corner here with one of the adults, and then you would have divided your class into 6 groups or whatever makes sense for the class size that you have. But station A in blue and station A in green would be working on the same activity. That would be a fluency activity. And then station B in blue and station B in green would be working on a purposeful practice activity. And so in this situation, all students end up sitting at the small group instruction table during the 60-minute period. So all students end up seeing an adult within that time. So we're taking that stigma away of small group instruction only being for students who struggle in the classroom. If you are not in a space where you might have access to another adult, this is what we call the one coach model. So we have developed, we call them entry tickets. They're basically diagnostics to see where students' level of understanding is on one of the topics. And from that, we determine who is demonstrating an emerging level of understanding, a developing level of understanding, and a proficient level of understanding. So you would group the students based on what their needs are. And over a 6-week period, you would end up seeing all students at the small group table, but you don't see all students every day. So A and B would be groups of students who demonstrated an emerging level of understanding. You would see them 4 times throughout the 6 weeks. C and D are students who have demonstrated a developing level of understanding. You would see them 3 times throughout the week. And then E and F are students who are already demonstrating proficiency, but we want to extend their thinking on these essential key concepts. And this is our recursive way of coming back to revisit them. You would see them twice over a 6-week period. In a 60-minute period, this is what it would look like. So this would be one of the weeks where you're seeing group A, D, and E. So they would rotate through the stations similar to a 2-coach model where one of the groups is at Coach's Corner, one of the groups is doing purposeful practice, and one of the groups is doing a fluency activity. And then there would be 3 groups that are not actually meeting with you that day. And so C and D would be working on the same purposeful practice activity. F and E would be working on the same fluency. And then when they rotate to this station, which would have been you, we do, all teachers this year do have a premium account with Knowledge Hook. I'm not sure if you knew that, but you could use your premium account with Knowledge Hook to assign a mission for them. All teachers in WRDSB have premium access to gizmos. You could assign a gizmos activity. Desmos always has great activities that can use, or you can just give them another form of purposeful practice. You could give them the problem that you were using in Coach's Corner over here if you wanted to see what they were capable of. So that is our one coach model. The tier 3 piece is what happens outside of math class. And this requires somebody else in your school having some collective responsibility in helping the classroom teacher make this happen. So this would happen by a CERT or a math intervention specialist, which is just basically somebody else in your school who has some extra periods, like maybe it's combined with guidance, maybe it's a halftime CERT, and they would withdraw small groups of 4 to 5 students who have been identified as having an emerging level of understanding in our essential key concepts, meaning that they have gaps from previous grades. It would be fluid, and it would provide students with multiple opportunities to demonstrate their learning. So they might be in it for a few weeks, and then we realize, oh, you actually have a really good understanding of this, that we won't withdraw you anymore. Here's the key piece. It does not take place during the regularly scheduled math instruction time. If you think about this from a logical standpoint, every time we are taking students out of the math classroom, they are missing grade level curriculum, which is only keeping them further behind their students, their peers. It would happen over 6 to 8 week blocks. And it may not be the same students every time. So we might focus 6 to 8 weeks on operational sense, and then we're going to come back and do 6 to 8 weeks on proportional reasoning, and then we would come back and do 6 to 8 weeks on algebraic reasoning. So it could be a different set of students depending on the needs. We currently have it happening 2 30-minute sessions each week, and we are seeing significant improvements just with that small amount of time. If you were able to give more time, we obviously would see even greater improvements. And the content focus would be key concepts from previous years. This is the number of credits that are required in order to get your secondary school diploma. This is why there's such a hard focus on English and mathematics, because the system that we are currently working with requires students to have 4 credits in English and 3 credits in math. So students who are not successful in grade 9 or 10, from that pool of students who are not successful, only 3.2% will go on to graduate. So math is a significant barrier, which is why we are kind of making it a priority over other subject areas right now. It's not that we discredit any other subject areas, it's just the reality of the system that we're currently working in. So when we look at this, we can see these areas here where there's only 1 credit required, 1 credit in arts, 1 credit in physical education, 1 credit in French, history, and geography. These might be potential subject areas that the withdrawal could happen from. And of course, you would have conversations with that student. If the only reason that student comes to school is because of phys ed, we wouldn't withdraw them from phys ed. We would be withdrawing them from one of the other areas. And it's only 2 30-minute periods a week. The idea being, if a student misses grade 6 social studies, it's probably not going to impact their ability to get their secondary school diploma as significantly as if they miss grade 6 math. And that is just the system we are working with right now. So we have some constraints around that. Some things to think about from the small group withdrawal, because intervention has a bad taste. That word has a bad taste in some educators' mouth. Withdrawal has a bad taste in some educators' mouth. So you might get some pushback or resistance around this. The need for intervention is always determined by the results of frequent research-informed and classroom-based assessment tools. It is not just because a student has an IEP, we're just going to assume that they need withdrawal. We make sure it is data-informed. Educators with higher levels of expertise in a student's target area of need should be the ones providing the intervention, or we do not see as much success. And small group withdrawal is actually not a form of streaming. Students are still participating in all regular classroom activities, including grade level expectations, core materials, and assessments. So this isn't new. We've done interventions in the past, but when we dug into the research to see why it wasn't closing gaps, here are the main reasons on why interventions may not be successful. The number one reason was intervention resulted in withdrawal from grade level classroom instruction, which is why we are not withdrawing them from math. A specialist did not employ the intervention, which meant many of the ways that were being taught to the students were not research-based and were not in an effective way to help them develop conceptual understanding. Building interventions on an ineffective core instructional program, relying too heavily on purchased intervention programs like Dreambox, focusing too much on what the staff cannot directly influence, assuming some students are incapable of learning at high levels due to cognitive ability or environmental conditions, which again returns to our North Star. The specifics. So what does this actually look like? There are some reasons. We've got top 5 reasons why teachers will say a small group instruction will never work in my classroom. And the 5th of the top 5 is, I can see how this would work with older or younger students, but mine are too young or old. This is all dependent on who you go observe. So if you've observed small group instruction happening in, say, a grade 1 or 2 class, and you teach grade 7 or 8, teachers tend to have the belief that, oh, I can see why it would work with younger students, but it will never work with my students, and then vice versa. If you observe a grade 6 class doing it well and you teach grade 1 or 2, you're going to say the opposite. Yeah, it makes sense that it would work with older, but mine are way too young. I don't have any resources and no time to make or find some. This is a fair point. We have created all the resources that you need for at least 2 of the essential key concepts that we are focusing on. There is too much curriculum to cover. I just don't have the time. This one always interests me because we have now identified what are the key essential concepts of the curriculum that you do need to make time to go back and revisit, as well as this is actually continuing to be instructional time. So when you are sitting down with this small group, you are continuing math instruction. So it's not like you're taking away from math instruction. Second reason, my students will be too off task and as a result will miss a whole hour of math learning. This one also always gives me a bit of a chuckle because if, I hate to be the one to break this to you, but if you really think all of your students were completely on task when you're not doing small group instruction, there's a little bit of a reality check that you maybe need to just think about, because I guarantee you not all of your students are on task all the time. But the number one reason is behaviors. I will have too many behaviors to deal with and will never get to the small group instruction. This is fully fair if you don't embed time to build a culture that allows for small group instruction and independent learning. If you do not do this with deliberate practice, descriptive feedback, and reflection, 100% the classroom is going to turn into a dumpster fire. We do not want that. So we have created for you 4 weeks of activities that you can do in your class 1 day a week. So your purposeful practice day, you're setting the stage to be able to eventually do small group instruction. And in these setting the stage, you are practicing small group instruction and you are giving feedback on how well students are doing on the small group instruction. So this is part of the resources that we have created. The way this would work for you is you would look at the essential key concepts and you would ask yourself, which essential key concepts have I already taught? And which essential key concepts will I be teaching soon? So this is a snapshot of the first block of the grade 7 and 8 long range plans. So say, for example, I'm actually living in this space. I would look at it and I would say, okay, integers is one of the essential key concepts. I've already taught that. And fractions is coming up soon. So somewhere in this space, I would give my students a check-in on grade level integers and previous grade level fractions. We have created those for you. That information is going to tell you who needs to be withdrawn for some tier 3 support, so that by the time you get to fractions, some gap closing has happened from previous grade levels. It also tells you who do you need to make sure you're really visiting with in that small group instruction on purposeful practice days to readdress some of the misconceptions that might have happened in integers. This isn't actually the best ideal sequence here. It should be 6 to 8 weeks after you've actually taught the topic that you're coming back to revisit it, because then it's out of the short-term memory.